the next one is not going to disappoint you, and it will also be moderated by our head of research, who does a lot of work for us for over many years, and I think it's going to be a very good conversation. So, yeah, David and Rene.
Hi, it's nice to be here. It's quite an honor, and I've been with Simple for a number of years now, and these environments are the reason why I continue to stay and yeah, enjoy Simple so much. I'm going to introduce Rene. He's at Accura. He has a background in international business and law, and he's worked at the intersection of law and IT for a number of years now. And so please welcome Rene.
So I was just asked to sort of set the scene before the talk, which is going to be a fireside. It's going to be an interview rather than a presentation. Is this better? Yes. Okay, I'll try to do it this way. Yeah, so the point is we'll go this a little bit interactive in the sense that we'll do an interview-based dialogue rather than a presentation. But just setting the scene, my background obviously is economics and law. I've done this for 25 years. So I come from a law firm that does a large volume of M&A activities, have the largest transaction volume for 5 years in a row in the Nordics. So that's the one leg. And the other leg is the ITO, the IT and outsourcing, which is the practice that I had. That means we do most of the infrastructure deals for banks and pension funds, large companies, but also do a lot of for startups. So basically my angle in this is both that of understanding the numbers, if you will, where's the value at, but also where's the risk at. So what I'll try to bring to the table, obviously, is some of the do's and don'ts from the deals that we see. It's AI, so it's very much obviously focused on the angle of your perspective, being company owners and investors, what to look for in terms of where the value at and what to avoid in terms of risk. That's basically setting the table. So I'll try to bring in as much as I can a practical angle, but also obviously also bringing in the legal context. Yeah.
All right, thanks. So my first question is this. It seems that many organizations treat AI tools as productivity software, similar to document management or search. From a legal perspective, do you see any problems with this?
Yeah, so first of all, that's a good question. Obviously, it's a tool that drives tremendous value in terms of automation and in terms of value creation. But it's a little bit like looking at a fast car. It's great if you're a good driver, and it's a terrible, dangerous place to be if you're not a good driver. And the risks that associated with this particular tool is very much that of knowing the legal context of what it does. It's a tool. It automatically tends to drive over automation, but the company, yourselves and as owners, remain liable. That's the one risk, obviously, knowing that risk and what it entails. And then the other risk that we can talk about is very much that of retention of organizational knowledge. That's the value, that's the asset, if you will, in any company. This tool can deteriorate that value or it can enhance the value. That's the other risk that we can talk about.
Yeah, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. So in terms of the legal risk, if you will, I think it's critical to recognize that a lot of you are following the AI Act and thinking that probably is the rules to know and be aware of. Obviously, that is somehow true in the sense that that is a specific regulation. Most of the regulation, without going too much into it, is very much about focusing on legal risk management. And most of the really significant parts of that has not come into effect yet, and in fact has just been delayed itself. The significance that you need to be aware is that all the other rules already applies. That means in terms of GDPR, IPR, all the other rules in terms of confidentiality, all those rules apply. And AI is basically just a tool. So you're liable as if carried out by yourself. So doing the automation that drives the activity here is on behalf of the company, although driven by the AI. And that's the reality you need to be aware of. So it's like fast tracking your legal exposure. So if you're not in control, then obviously that's the dangerous thing. And the fact that AI in itself is inherently driving automation, what you want to avoid is over-automation and thereby loss of control. So if you lose control on something that drives exponentially legal exposure, then obviously it becomes a dangerous thing.
Okay, I want to dig down on that a little bit. So if tools like Harvey and Legora sit on top of foundational models like Claude, does that mean the real legal power in legal AI is shifting from the specialized legal packages to the underlying AI infrastructure?
So that's a really interesting question, and that's where you have to look into the crystal ball a little bit, but bear with me. From my perspective, the IT stacks sort of have 4 layers, if you will. You have the foundational basis, your large language models in the bottom. Those are substitutable. Changing from one to another doesn't take that long. As long as you're agnostic in your tool choice, then you can choose between the two. That's the basis. Then you have the legal tech on top. Those obviously are very much driving the activity these days because they are commoditizing the legal knowledge and thereby building concentration in the market. So it's a good investment opportunity, obviously. On top of that, then you have the integration into sort of your standard layers, your Office package, and your will. That needs to be kept separately. And then you have the real asset on top. And that's the driver for the second risk identified. That's the making or breaking. That's the company data layer. That's where you take your organizational knowledge and keep that separable. You do not put that into the other layers. If you do that, you either lose the data or it becomes commodity and thereby not worth anything because competition will have the same knowledge. So keeping that layer separable is what's going to drive the value in the separate companies. So in terms of where's the value at, obviously it'll be everywhere. The more we use AI, the foundational model obviously will continue to rise in value. The integration layer obviously will drive a lot of value. The concentration risk, if you will, is not being agnostic in your choices, not being able to substitute if the value of one increases and changes over time. If you lock yourself into that so you are not able to do the substitution without losing the data, that's really the inherent danger here in the layering.
Okay, can you give any specific examples of companies making mistakes with compliance workflows?
Yeah. So starting out in some of the known cases, obviously many of you will have seen, you can start by saying, what is AI inherently at this stage really good at? It's really good at driving out information of large pools of data. They're really good at comparing data, doing any sort of illustration of data. That's where the real strength is right now. Where they're not that strong right now is any kind of abstract conclusions. That is driving out conclusions based on non-definite data points. What that means is that any legal assessment is based on judgments, on legal schooling that are non-specific criteria. That's not where it's really good at. So what does that mean? That means your answer to your question in terms of where we're seeing the risk right now, in terms of legal and compliance checks, 2 things. Chatbots. A lot of companies that we work with, banks, pension funds, those kind of companies, they're using, obviously, the AI technology for chatbots. People don't want to talk to their salesmen anymore. They want to do it themselves. They want to be able to model right in the app itself, which is great. And it's certainly driving down a lot of cost and driving user experiences up. But the risk there is that the chatbots limitation is the categorization. So that basically means if it has to explain what yellow is, or red is, or blue is, it's excellent. But if it has to make a depiction of whether it's one color or the other, and it's an assessment that based on a categorization, then we see a lot of defects. So where do we see a lot of these defects? Certainly in chatbots. But it's not because of the use of chatbots itself, it's because of this specific use. So it has to be tailored specifically to drive information, but it has to not be judgmental in the sense that it's making decisions. That's one. Another place where we've seen it a lot, and that has been in the media, obviously is in litigation. We've seen all these cases itself, hallucinations driven, where it basically comes up with its own references and own rules. If it's not there, it'll find it, called hallucinations. Obviously, we saw the Deloitte case in Australia, example for that as well. So Deloitte came up with this report to the Australian government, and they basically asked AI to do most of the report. It turns out, so the base conclusion in the report was based on a hallucination. So the Australian government asked Deloitte to fix the report and put in the right citations, and they could do that. But since the base condition derived in the report was a hallucination, that could not be found in the real world. So the result of the report was basically erroneous and could not be fixed. And obviously now there's a liability case in Australia. So the point based on this, as I said before, is make sure that you have QA processes to verify, not itself the data finding or the building of the report, which is excellent, no, but the conclusions themselves, the abstract assessments, those are the ones you want to verify. So that's certainly where we are seeing it in the media, where the defects are made. But where we see them every day is very much in these chatbots with the banks, which what we call cyclical risks and concentration risks. So, and those are hyper-frequent, so it means even small defects on a large scale obviously become structurally large exposures and thereby also large liabilities.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that liability case, but is that a governance blind spot, or is that something else?
Good question. Yeah. So again, there are many different paths here, but we can try to break it down. Obviously, what the AI Act will bring is a governance of how to work in managing risks. Because what is going to happen is the legal world will transcend from being people like me into very much being machine-driven to a large extent, maybe 85% to be popular, in the sense that knowing the rules and being able to present those rules and use those rules will be driven by machines. That basically means that many of the changes here will be administrating these kinds of systems rather than using traditional cases. And then you will have strategic legal advice on top. So the assessments will be made by people. Everything else will be run by machines. And that is happening extremely fast. I just come from a meeting. I'm doing obviously these meetings with a high frequency. But I'm amazed what these systems can do already. So that is not if, that is a guaranteed will happen. But it's also very, very important to remember that the outcome of these systems, the decisions, if you will, those will remain with the boards and the CEO, obviously on the one side, and then the lawyers in terms of liability on the other side. And my point here being that we need to be able to recognize and work against what we call the automation bias, which is a human psychology tendency to rely and trust machines over human judgments. So here's a contradiction of terms, because if the machines cannot do the assessment that people can do, then we need to be aware which is which. So we need to be able to have these support board decisions, CEO decisions, legal decisions, but certainly not make them ourselves. And the bias here is they're able to do this themselves, and we cannot see what it's based on. So if we have this bias, we do not recognize the fact that it's not really good at this part, since it's so dramatically good at the other parts. And that is an inherent danger for anybody making a decision. So how do we work with this? We work with them in terms of building up data tracing. Any decision, where does the information come from? What's the source? Document the source. If we're building something new, if we're making a new decision process, where did this come from? Who made this idea? How do we trace the data so we can go back? For litigation purposes and compliance purposes, you need to be able to trace your decisions and document your decisions. That's one. That's in the Act itself. We need to teach our people, so we build this organizational knowledge. That's a requirement in the AI Act. And then we obviously need to have liability with the people making the decisions, incentivizing them to do the right thing. And that's what the AI Act does as well. So we basically just need to read the rules, understand that this is about risk management. It is not about knowing, because there is no traceability in an AI. So it's about verifying your process of making decisions, being able to trace back if errors are made, because the AI itself does not allow for that.
All right, if I can ask you a question, what's the most common misunderstanding organizations have today about legal responsibility when using AI tools?
Yeah. So the first one is that we just wait for the AI Act, and until then we sort of have a free trial, if you will. That's not the case. So obviously today even a lot of the actual applications that we see are in areas like HR HR is what we call a critical area. That's where the AI Act has not come into to effect yet, but that's where fines will be up to 7% of the global turnover. So obviously, this is real money. It's something that the companies will become increasingly aware of. You have GDPR itself carrying up to 4% of global turnover. So every time we use personal data, it's basically, in a GDPR context, a processing. So while you may not be doing it, or the organization may not be doing the process, the AI is doing the process. And in terms of the law, it does not distinguish between one or the other. So you need to see the AI as an email. It's basically just a tool. So you're not accountable for the use of data, the information obligations, the ability to take out my data, withdrawal, consents, things like that. Then obviously those will be breach of GDPR. And if you do that in a high frequency, and AI automatically entails that, then you're in the higher end of the fines. So that's just GDPR, but it also means anything like a breach of confidentiality clauses. If you put your contracts in there, obviously it's for a different purpose. It's been shared for a different purpose. Obviously, that will be breach of contract. Things like marketing purposes, anything like that applies today. IPR infringements, obviously information that you get from contextual. And that's the whole purpose of the AI, right? It's gathering all this information, making use in a new context, driving an asset that wasn't there before. But all of that, unless you extract the data and do it right, are all constituting breach of contracts, of employee relations, of GDPR, and things like that. So you basically just fast-track legal exposure.
For family offices and investors, looking at this as a potential investing space, what's the real strategic value likely to sit? Specialized legal AI companies, underlying AI infrastructure that a lot of the other speakers have talked about today.
Yeah. So let me try. Obviously, the underlying infrastructure is there to stay. And since the application is being driven, then all the underlying data centers, infrastructure investments, those will be good, safe investments, but those are also highly commoditized. So if you want something interesting, then obviously you need to go up in the layer. I normally sort of compare this with what happened in the mobile industry. You have the iOS in the bottom, but that's not really driving the value. The apps are. The equivalent to the apps here would be your legal tech. It would be all sorts of specific applications. Specific in there. Those obviously would be the value drivers, but that's also where you would risk not making any investment at all. Obviously, there's a parity there in terms of risk and payoff. But the real value and point here in terms of looking at value, that's what I do for a living, is looking into organizations and making sure that they're the ones being aware from a risk perspective and procedural aspect, that they're driving the value in their separate data layer. So everything over time will become a commodity in terms of legal, all the apps, if you will, of this world will be commodity. The only thing that will not be commodity is the separate data layer in the separate company. So whatever makes them unique and thereby also drives the value, if they are good at investing in that, they will be able to reduce employees and thereby their relative cost of the asset, and thereby increasing the value of the asset. So that's one thing. Are they working actively to drive that value? And the other side of that is, are they by way of making sure there's no shadow numbers with employees using AIs, private AIs, and thereby taking the data from the company's specific layer into non-proprietary data layers? Or, for instance, having leaks or anything like that, are they deteriorating the value of the organizational knowledge in the companies? So are they driving that value, and are they protecting that value? For any due diligence we'll do in the future in terms of AI, and that will be mostly any company, that is a key thing to look at, whether you're looking at the value of a startup or whether you're looking at the value of a bank. Absolutely the same thing.
I have one last question for you. Look a few years ahead. What's generally going to be changed by legal governance of AI with AI, and what's going to be the same?
So what's definitely going to be a change is we're going to see a lot of churn in the legal industry, for sure. So the challenge that we're seeing, and I come from a law firm with 650 people, obviously, I learned what I know today by starting off on the base floor doing simple things. All of that will not be there for the future generations. So how's that going to change things. It's certainly going to reduce the concentration of knowledge. It's going to commoditize a lot of jobs. So that's going to change. Then you will have certain people that are able to do this assessment on top that the AI will ultimately never, in my view, be the best at. And those individuals will be, highly valuable in a society like that, obviously. So those are the changes. In terms of what will change in the law, we will go from, in my view, now we're in the far future, obviously, we won't have the same kind of litigation. All of that will be done by machines. All assessments, chatbots, anything like that will be 85% automated. So fewer people will be doing a lot more, and a lot of what all the companies are doing today and the value of that will be commoditized. That's the future we're looking into, and it's exciting, but it's also really scary.
Well, join me in thanking Rene for the insight. Bye.